Okay, good morning, everybody. I can confirm that we are live streamed. Welcome to today's meeting of the Risk and Assurance Committee. I'm required to make an opening statement. I remind councillors that the public section of this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and that the recording will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. I also remind all present that local government decision-making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during the meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. Right, let's get on with the business. I've just got some opening remarks to make before starting the agenda proper. Firstly, this has obviously been an incredibly difficult time for the staff working during the COVID and all that it's entailed. And governance teams and finance teams in particular have been really hard pressed at this time, and I'm sure looking forward to the Christmas break. But I just want to, as other councils have done, just acknowledge and compliment the staff for what they have done, for what they have achieved, and the way they've supported us during this time. This will be a short meeting today, and I just want to explain the reasons why. Firstly, we were hoping that the audit from Audit New Zealand would be available. As you've heard, we had to defer the last meeting, and the last meeting was delayed waiting for it. I understand now from Matt that the 3 outstanding matters have been satisfactorily resolved. They are just waiting for a tick from Wellington for some data, which is not expected to cause any problem. And so we are confident that the matter will be able to be brought to the 16th of December meeting. You will notice that there is no risk assessment attached to the agenda. And the reason for that is that the risk assessment of some 6 weeks ago, when we held the last meeting, there has been no change. And therefore, rather than reproduce 30 pages of the risk assessment, I deemed it not necessary to publish it on this particular occasion. The only difference, of course, is the item we have on the agenda on COVID, and that matter will be discussed later. So now let's get on with the, I'm just confirming, we have a full quorum, so there are no apologies. And in addition, we have Councillor Winters, Councillor Thompson and Councillors Neese attending, and of course they are welcome to ask questions or make comment, but I do ask that they give way to councillors on the committee first. Apologies, so there are none from members. Public forum, there's no public forum. There are no new items to be added to the agenda, and there are no changes to the order of business. I now call for any changes, for any declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations? I take it there are none, so thank you for that. There is no public excluded business to be transferred into the open. Right, turning now to page 8, the minutes of the Risk and Assurance Committee meeting on the 21st of October. Are there any amendments or matters arising?
Happy to move them as a trunk record, Mr. Chair.
I second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I take it there are no comments, and therefore I ask those to raise your hand if you accept the proposal. Thank you. Moved. Right, we're now on to page 17, the committee chairperson's report. Matt Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So your committee chairperson's report includes an attachment that is the forward-looking work programme for this committee, and a further attachment which includes the historical reporting to this committee going back to March 2021. So it's last year's work programme and then what's in front of you, the concluding 3 meetings of this trend. So that's it.
Okay, are there any comments? Any questions? Therefore, would somebody like to move that we receive the report? Councillor Von Dalen, Oh, second.
Mr.
So-
Chair, before we receive the report, and I do have a comment looking at the future work program. I would like to see somewhere built into that future work program a report back to this committee on the efficiency and effectiveness from a financial perspective of our organisation. I think we really do need to do a bit of a deep dive at some time during the year, this next period, on this. I would like consideration to be made towards zero-based budgeting, recognising the times that our ratepayers are feeling, the pressure they're feeling under right at the moment financially. And we talked at the annual plan workshop of about this, and I think it's something that this committee should take up, and we should actually. I would like to see, personally, I would like it in the March reports. A report on efficiency and effectiveness, and just to make sure we're, there's no denigration here. I just want to make sure that we've got the right way forward. The other concern I have is the and it's a sort of government direction, but we've been forced to do more and more planning, and I want to see this council really putting pressure on for the DUI, for action orientated work, and we discussed that recently as well. So that's just my thoughts. I don't know if that's practical for staff for March, but I think there's some urgency about that. Thank you.
Yeah, my comment to that would be, as you're aware, finance in particular is something which is discussed by the council as a whole, and therefore, if you're talking about the financial efficiency of the organisation, and it has been examined in detail by various agencies over the last year, well, I think that is something which needs to come to council. I'm quite prepared to look at your second point and liaise with the staff to check whether or not we ought to be bringing that to the March meeting. Matt, do you have any comment?
Councillor Clark to comment first, Mr. Chairman, before I make any comments.
Yeah,
Councillor Clark.
yeah, picking up on Andrew's comments, I have some reservations about a check on the budget or check on how the money goes without kind of specific terms of reference. It's a very sensitive area as to what in fact constitutes value and what doesn't, and it's so broad brush that would it actually really achieve anything? I'm not knocking your proposition, Andrew. I believe we need to keep an eye on value for money propositions, but how we measure them is just so not borders on the subjective in terms of value. So I'd probably like that to go around the table to see what the other members feel about a proposition like that. Cheers.
So through Mr. Chairman, what I could suggest is I could bring a draft terms of reference to your next meeting. I think it would, as you said, be very difficult to meet Councillor Von Daleson's timeframe of bringing a report to your next meeting, but a report that would show what the terms of reference, as Councillor Clark suggested, would be, so everyone is really clear on what it is and what it isn't. Can I suggest that that would be a way forward for your work programme? And then at that stage, you could decide whether or not that would be an item that would be a council matter or a risk and assurance matter at the time when you consider the terms of reference.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Chitara.
Yeah, I would support what Matt has said. That makes absolute sense to me. It enables the staff to be more considered about how they approach this, and therefore we get a very considered response from them come March.
Bruce, as the external advisor and as the deputy chair, do you have any comment to make on this?
Oh, look, I do, but I notice if I can be fair, Stuart and Doug got their hands up first. I'd be very happy to comment after them, David.
Chairman Leader.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I just need to be clear. I think we need to be clear in terms of what is the expectation and what is the purpose. Is this a role for the risk and assurance, as Matt has highlighted, or is this a function of all elected members on the quarterly basis in terms of reporting and our jurisdiction over not only the annual plan, but also the 10-year plan in terms of scrutiny, in terms of how those plans are prepared, in terms of the financials. So I just need to be clear as to what Andrew's actually asking for, because I agree with Matt. You know, the time frame in March is regardless of whether it's council or risk and assurance is not realistic.
Councillor Crosby.
Yeah, it's just supporting what the chair said, also adding the issue around the KPI for the CEO. I understand, that is a critical issue as well. So we just need to make sure that we're not duplicating work or requirements that are already in play.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Andrew, what I intend doing is discussing this offline, working out what we need to do, making sure we're not duplicating anything, and certainly not ignoring, but I really want to make sure we're fully aware of what we want to do and make sure we're not doubling up with anything else which we're doing. But now you've got your hand up. Do you want to come back?
Yes, I just just to let you understand a bit more what I'm coming from. I was concerned when we had our annual plan workshop, about the level of proposed extra spending, and considering that we're only into the first year of a long-term plan. And I just felt it was probably best to drill into it at a risk and assurance level before we took it to full council. That's all. And as I say, I wasn't died in a ditch over March, but June seems a long way away. That was all. And for it to be of value before if it gets too late, then we're moving into an election period, and anything can change after that. So you've got to evaluate whether it's worth it in the time frame, but and who should do it. That was my reasoning for risk and assurance, was just to have a deep dive as a subcommittee before we took it to full council. Thank you.
Bruce.
Yeah, look, David, you did ask me for my views, and I think you have to be fair, Andrew. I'm lukewarm on this idea, partly because you've just done your LTP. You should have probably had this view then. Secondly, it's at such a high level that I think the issue has been raised. That is a substantial undertaking to work out whether Bay of Plenty Regional Council is efficient. I think actually Bill's point about what are you trying to measure becomes really important, because can I say professionally, in terms of my review work of councils outside of my committee work, the bigger question is, are we effective? And that makes this a substantial exercise. And I wonder whether, in fact, we haven't got other ways which we've looked at it. And Paul, I want to steal your thunder. I notice you've raised the Section 17 type reviews, which tend to look at particular and key parts of the organisation. So I think it would be ambitious to undertake a total efficiency and effectiveness review of the council in reasonably short order. So I would only consider this wise if we did exactly what you're suggesting, Matt, which is that you come back, and I guess it's going to be March, with our terms of reference as to how this might happen. But I would think that we would want to take into account what have we done to date that gives us confidence already, because we do have an obligation under Section 101 of the Act to be prudent all the time. And what, quite frankly, should narrow down potentially the areas that we should look at. Otherwise, I would struggle to see what an efficiency and effectiveness assessment would be for the total council and what could be done in time.
Thank you for that, Bruce. Stuart.
Yeah.
Hands still up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got another matter when you're finished with that one.
Okay, Titara, you had your hand up.
No, I had my thumb up, approving the previous comments.
Okay, so are there any, on this agenda item or on Councillor Von Dadelson's suggestion, are there any other comments before I move on to Councillor Crosby? Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Through you, maybe to Matt and others, I was just looking at the work program, and from an assurance point of view, I didn't see glaringly the issue around the review of the Quayside SIPO and dividend policy, and whether that should have an oversight of risk and assurance. And the reason I say that is to use the wisdom of the Deputy Chair, Mr. Robinson, on that, who would be potentially excluded from a critical element of our whole council funding. So I'd just be interested in Matt's or yourselves' view on that as being part of the work program at a level.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Crosby is quite right that item is dealt with at a council level. So therefore, Mr. Robertson isn't included in that as a member of this Risk and Assurance Committee. So at the moment, the work programme takes that through a council approval, consideration, approval and recommendations back to Quayside process. So there is no process at the moment for Risk and Assurance to be involved directly.
And can I make the additional point that, of course, Bruce Robertson doesn't just appear for formal committee meetings. We retain him as a member of the committee, and we can go to him and do go to him for comment as and when required, and therefore he would be included in the process. Right. So we're down to receives a report. I think, Titara, you moved it earlier, did you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, seconded. Councillor Crosby, all those raise your hand. In favour, raise your hand. Carried. Right, Chairman's discretionary fund. Matt Taylor again, please.
Mr. Chairman, that's the minutes of the
Sorry.
previous meeting. So,
Oh, sorry, I'll turn the wrong page.
internal audit status report is the next item, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, page 22. Is Aaron on that? Yes, he is. Right, Aaron, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, councillors. It's a fairly brief report this time, you'll see. I'll take that report as read. The scoping for the reviews is nearing completion, and the ICT security review will be reported at the next RAC meeting. We've had a couple of actions closed out, and the remaining health and safety action relates to a monitoring and checking process, which will be implemented once the critical risk project rollout has been completed. Any questions?
I just have one. Going to your report on page 23, you list a number of matters which are in progress. It may be helpful for us to know what sort of percentage of progress you've made on each item. Would that be difficult?
I can do that for next meeting, Chair.
Thank you.
Was there anyone in particular, Mr. Chairman, that you are, because Aaron either is doing this work himself or we've commissioned external internal auditors to do this, so Aaron will be aware of exactly which stage each of these items are in, if you wish to have any clarification now.
No, I just think it ought to be brought to the committee. Are there any difficult matters you're dealing with at the moment, or anything which you would think might be brought to our attention in the future that you've so far discovered?
Not so far, Mr. Chair.
Okay, questions from anybody? Right, therefore, would somebody like to move that we receive the report? Right, okay, so Councillor Crosby, Councillor Clark, raise your hand in favour. Carried. Right, we now move on to the substantive matter of the key risk register. As explained, we haven't put the whole risk register on this time. But what I'm delighted to see is the work which Steve Slack has put in on getting contingency, or if you like, or a different way of looking at the risks itself. We're looking at the short-term, current and long-term risks, and the risk velocity, which I think I'll leave to him to explain. But certainly one of the matters which we have to deal with now and in the future is living with COVID, and as far as the council is concerned, it is working in a longer term COVID environment. So enough from me. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. So through you, Chair, happy to take the report as read. I will just make a few comments on the report and then open it up for discussion. So as mentioned, we had a really good key risk register workshop a little over a month ago, and so appreciate all the efforts the council has put into providing guidance and recommendations on how we could improve the key risk register reporting. Based on that workshop, we've recommending or changed the way we intend to do risk reporting going forward for 2022, including a risk velocity classification. Risk velocity relates to how fast that risk might materialize. And so there's some risks within the key risk register that are slow moving, and there's some risks that are fast moving. And so by breaking out the classification and the reporting over that risk velocity, the Risk and Assurance Committee will get more regular reporting on those risks that may have a high risk velocity, and then less regular reporting unless it escalates in terms of those risks that are slow moving. So they will all be reported throughout the 1 year cycle, but it's just in terms of focusing on those that have the ability to move quicker more often than those that don't. So that's one of the recommended changes. And of course, if any of those risks escalate outside that expected velocity, then that will be taken up to the Risk and Assurance Committee anyway. So one of the other suggestions coming out of that Risk and Assurance workshop was to identify the opportunities that the risks relate to, so that it contextualizes the risks, so that when reviewing the risks by the Risk and Assurance Committee, they can assess those risks against the opportunities that presents. So therefore, going forward, we will include in those risks what those opportunities relate to, so that again, it gives a bit of context in terms of where those risks sit against opportunities. And the other thing coming out of the workshop was to include some of the key kind of emerging and operational risks that may not rise up to the key risk register, but have those reported on an ongoing basis, so that the Risk and Assurance Committee can have an overview of some of those operational risks that are front of mind for the organisation. So the intention is to revolve those through, so that not only are you reviewing those key strategic risks that sometimes don't change, but also having an overview of some of the operational risks that are front of mind for the organisation, so that you're comfortable in terms of what the council is doing in that space. And obviously, one of the key emerging and operational risks at the moment with the high velocity is COVID. So we've included within this report an example of our COVID response in terms of what that would look like, and also to give you an overview of what we are doing in the COVID space. So happy to take questions on that.
Firstly, before I open up for questions, can I say I'm delighted with the work which you have been doing. The one comment I would like to make is that our CE has pushed out a very effective and excellent set of guidance lines for how we live and operate in COVID. I think that this is a matter which ought to be formally adopted by councillors and approved by councillors. And I think the meeting next March is probably the appropriate time to do that, when the traffic light system has settled down, and hopefully COVID has settled down into a more longer term scenario. Right, any comments on that? Or I think, yes, Councillor Crosbie, your hand's raised.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Stephen. Some really good work. Has any thought been given into the velocity of the mitigation actions and controls. In other words, the speed at which, if possible, your actions are going to take effect to reduce the impact of the risk. That's the other side of the equation.
So yes, that comes into how often the leadership team is monitoring those risks, so that the risk velocity ties into how often they review those risks as a leadership team, and therefore can then implement those mitigating actions if required.
Are you measuring in some shape or form the effect of those actions in that teamwork?
As part of the monitoring, they do look at how effective they are. We're not measuring them in terms of a scale, but they are assessing that as part of that review.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would add is, I guess, as we discuss the mitigating actions and as they're suggested, we're always cognizant of whether or not they do actually make any difference. So some of those things will clearly change the scale and therefore the recording of the impact or the likelihood of that risk materialising. But a lot of the mitigation is about containing the risk necessary rather than necessarily reducing the risk score that we have. But I guess, Steve, when we discuss that at the leadership team, we are cognizant of the fact that some of those mitigate actions might or might not reduce the absolute score that we have.
Kitara?
Oh, no, sorry. No, I forgot to
Any
take the
other
thumb down.
question?
No, I don't have a question, sorry.
Any other questions or comments? I think this COVID thing is I'm very pleased to see the work which has been going into it, and I'm very pleased with what Fiona has been pushing out. But are any comments on that, or are people content with what we're doing at the moment? I'd like to get a feeling for that, if I may. Councillor White.
That's just a thumbs up saying yes, support. Sorry, it keeps coming up. I don't know why, but it keeps popping up.
You're obviously a hitchhiker. No other comments. I see Fiona's just popped up on the screen with a hand up. Fiona, welcome to the meeting, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to the councillors in terms of their direction and guidance here. We are in the position where councillors seek information each week and provide guidance and direction. We are in the position where we are a regional council, so my councillors are meeting virtually to ensure that they are safe and our communities are safe. Very comfortable with the controls we have in place, and that we're seeking to ensure that our communities participate with us in terms of those controls. But can I just say thank you now to the councillors in terms of your direction and guidance over the last few months, and looking forward to continuing with that direction and guidance as we live with COVID over the next few months.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Well, thank you for those words, Fiona. Yeah, it's a question of us all working together, and I'm delighted that we are doing so. So, Bruce.
Yeah, look, thank you. Just, I don't want to prolong the meeting necessarily. Stephen, I was just wondering, I was just going back to the original risk, and the risk is that COVID impacts that we're our ability to deliver, essentially to operate. Do we have any particular functions within council that are more vulnerable than others to the impact of endemic COVID? And if so, what's the state of our continuity plans around that?
Yes, so obviously through the council we operate some essential services, especially those that we saw continue to operate under the level 4 lockdowns that were classified as essential services. So those teams are continually assessing their business continuity plans to make sure that they evolve as the situation evolves. So they do have business continuity plans in place. And they're adaptable in terms of if they need to change, if say the risk escalates and that type of thing. So that is constantly front of mind, and that's been business continuity has been one of the factors when developing the guidelines for operating at red and orange. That's been one of the key front of mind factors in ensuring that those can continue to operate under those guidelines.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Right, there seems to be no further questions. Can I have a mover for accepting the report? Councillor White, second Councillor Crosbie, please raise your hand. Approved. Carried. Right, we now move to excluded, public excluded section. So, Jenny, can you take the action that's required, please? Just in case people have not met her before, Jenny is an advisor who is who's dealing with the live streaming for this particular meeting. I apologise, that's supposed to be on mute.